I think this horse could be the best handicapped horse staying hurdling in the country. Hello and welcome along to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel in association with Racing TV. This is our episode 2 of our Jumps Horses to Follow for next season, as well as our first weekend preview. It's not necessarily going to be a weekend preview, but it's going to be our first best bets, which we are going to be holding ourselves more accountable for this year, for Chepstow. Chepstow this weekend, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, fantastic. A lot of people say that's kind of the starting point, really, of the season. Once you get into October, it's nice to have racing even midweek at the likes of Exeter the last couple of days.
Taunton, Huntington.
It's just quality. Ludlow was on today. You feel like the racing is really back. Racing at Ferrier on Saturday over Jumps as well.
Romeo Coolio entered.
I know. It's just all the good horses beginning to come out. Good tracks, quality.
Absolutely. Cannot wait. I actually will be at Chepstow on the Saturday. But enough about Chepstow. This is about finding those festival winners, ideally, or horses that just might be competing at a high level or might go through a string of wins. But for those people interested in Cheltenham and those people interested in the Cheltenham Showcase meeting that is at the end of this month, we will both be there. I'll be on Saturday, you'll be there both days.
I will.
If you want to be there as well, with a little bit of a perk, how about this? We're doing a giveaway, and you can be with me and Andrew and a guest of your choice in the parade ring for a race at Cheltenham. You get to watch the horses go round before the race. You can watch the race in there if you wanted to, and you actually get to watch the winners go in and take their applause, and hopefully you've backed that winner. One of those experiences that not many people get to do, and you, the Let's Talk Racing viewers, are able to do this because we've worked very closely with Cheltenham this year, and there's going to be a whole host of hopefully exciting giveaways that we can do. And this is the first one. The stipulation to the giveaway is you have to be subscribed to the Let's Talk Racing YouTube channel on YouTube. You have to have liked this video, and you have to have commented, "Let's Talk Cheltenham." This is people who've only got tickets for Cheltenham. You don't get an extra ticket, so you have to be there on the day. But it's going to be the Saturday. Both me and Andrew and you can be in the parade ring for hopefully an amazing experience for the winner. Really looking forward to doing that. I think you're looking forward to doing that as well.
It's going to be fantastic. I feel like I've already won the competition myself.
Absolutely. So if you do want to enter, it's Let's Talk Cheltenham down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and you have to have a ticket already. If you don't have one, there'll be a link in the first line of the description for you to go and purchase. But now it's time to talk about the horses to follow. The first video went down well, and we need to keep that up. Your first horse to follow, please.
My first horse to follow comes from Gavin Cromwell's yard. Horse only ran once last year, ran in a maiden hurdle on St. Stephen's Day. It's a horse called I Am Lorenzo, owned by Tim O'Driscoll. Obviously has a few nice horses. He's got Redemption Day going novice hurdling, finally. Some might say this year for Willie Mullins. But I thought this horse was very eye-catching. Behind No Flies on Him. That form in itself, no flies on him, disappointed, but the form I feel is good. There's an awful lot of winners in behind, a lot of maiden hurdle winners in there, and he was not knocked around under Keith Donoghue, first time out, given a pretty easy time of things. Wasn't much expected from him in the market, so maybe slightly exceeded expectations on that occasion. I've talked to Tim O'Driscoll, obviously one of those ones where you only see the horse once, you don't know whether something's happened to the horse. He was just a bit babyish last year. They decided to kind of scrap him by February time, give him plenty of time off, but he's back in training. They're very happy with him. I think he's the type of horse, he mightn't win first time out, but I'd be disappointed if he couldn't land a maiden hurdle and certainly pay his way in handicaps. We all know how good Gavin Cromwell is with plotting some of these horses. So I Am Lorenzo, Tim O'Driscoll, Gavin Cromwell. I think there's an awful lot to like.
Yeah, I do think the form figure that day and his finishing place didn't actually reflect on how good of a run it was. I think he was only beaten 4 lengths, wasn't he?
Yeah, just under 3 3/4. But as I say, he was given a hand ride and he was certainly nearest to the finish.
Absolutely. Because you're leaning towards the Irish horses, I've thought I would lean towards the British horses. And the first one that I'm going to follow, and it's actually the first Paul Nicholls trained horse of these videos so far.
Are you feeling okay?
It's taken me an awfully long time to get there, but I did have a chat with Paul in the week and we spoke about a couple of horses, and there are a couple that I did want to mention, and the first one is Tutti Quanti, who is going to be a novice hurdler this year. He's ran twice so far in his career, once over in France and once over here, I think it was Taunton, where he finished a close second to Joyeuse. who is she a half sister to Epperton?
I believe she is, yeah. Very well bred.
Nikki Henderson trained, JP McManus owned. I think she's very well bred, and I think they think a lot of her. She's only ran that once as well for Nikki, so I think that she could be quite exciting. She was a 5-year-old, slightly more physically mature. He was only a 4-year-old, and he really, really took her to the line. She had to battle hard, and she had to battle, put her head down, and he looked a bit babyish and a bit green. I think he probably would have benefited massively from that break over the summer to physically mature, and I do think they think a lot of him. So Tutti Quanti could be an exciting novice hurdler for next year. Your second horse to follow, please.
It comes from Tom Cooper's yard. I've already put up Shuttle Diplomacy 2 weeks ago in the first horse to follow video, but I also quite like Butcher Hollow, a horse that ran in plenty of good maiden hurdles last year in Ireland. Didn't actually win one, so 0 from 4 over hurdles, but he won his bumper at Galway at the start of the season, bumped into the likes of Jade de Grugy at Leopardstown, a couple other decent horses over a variety of trips. And I think they're probably finding their way with this horse to see what actually Trippy wants. Shapes like a stare, but then kind of got outstayed every now and then. So he's one of these horses I'd like to think he's off a mark of 118 over hurdles. They can obviously go down a handicapping route, they can go into a maiden hurdle, or they could go chasing. Based on the frame of him, based on the fact he's a point-to-point winner, I'd like to see them go over fences as soon as possible. And given the way Tom Cooper usually goes about with his horses, I'd be thinking that is the way they'll go down. But that being said, off 118, I do think there's a bit of kind of juice in that mark. Obviously, the Moonies have pumped an awful lot of money into Tom Cooper's yard over the last couple of years. Said that with Shuttle Diplomacy. I think he might be a real graded horse. Not sure this horse is a graded horse, but I'm looking at it going 118. I'd be very disappointed if this wasn't a 130 plus chaser.
I like that. I definitely like that, and he does scream a chaser. I completely agree. Talk to the Man is my second horse to follow, again trained by Paul Nicholls. Now, in the conversation that I had, I wanted to tap into what is the next potential superstar, and this was the one nominated. He was bought privately. I think they just absolutely love him. Yeah. Sticking to bumpers, so will be a bumper horse this year. I think he's likely to win a bumper and then go to that. I think he qualified for the Newbury Sales bumper in March.
Regent Stroll's race.
Yeah. Suspect he will follow that route, but Talk to the Man is possibly the most exciting young horse in Paul Nicholls' yard, especially the ones that we haven't yet seen run for him.
How much does that excite you?
Yeah, it excites me. And
does a good young Paul Nicholls horse still grab you by the nads the way it used to?
It does. The one thing that with the Paul Nicholls horses, I get really excited when the bumper horses, not so much as novice hurdlers, and I get really excited when the novice chasing. So you always have that gap in the middle where I fall out of love with them slightly. But if I can hold on to that, then I really do like it. Like I did like Captain Teague. Didn't massively love him last year, but I think he'd be a good novice chaser next year. But yeah, looking forward to this Talk to the Man. I think they think an awful lot of him. Johnny Delahaye bought him, and I do think they paid an awful lot of money for him privately because they were pretty keen on him not going to the sales. So yeah, Talk to the Man and Tutti Quanti, two Paul Nicholls young horses that are exciting. Obviously Tutti Quanti staying novice hurdling because he is still a novice hurdler. Talk to the Man probably staying in bumpers.
Yeah, no, I see the case for both of them. Best of luck with the two of them. I've gone to Gordon's now for a handicapper, I believe. I think he's going to go over fences this year. A horse called Cletus Pool. Now, obviously, plenty of people will know him. Went off near on favourite for the Pertemps last year. Came 9th in the end. Ran an okay race. Not sure whether he was quite ready for the experience in the end. You know, he'd ran in a couple of maiden hurdles. He'd ended up winning a maiden hurdle. He'd come second in a Pertemps qualifier. It was a bit of a rush to get him there. I got the impression with Gordon last year, obviously we had the tragic scene with Absolute Notions. He was the horse for that race. And then this guy kind of got shunted in as being the number one very late.
Yeah.
And they ran him in a Pertemps qualifier back end of February, then ran him again. Then he disappointed at Punchestown. I'd be able to scrap that. I think he's a much better horse than that. I think he's a soft ground horse. We'll see the best of him maybe in that kind of December, January, February period. 3 miles, fences.
Could it be a Kim Muir type?
I would have thought so, yeah. It's the Kim Muir Irish national, real staying grudge races, maybe even in a year or two's time, Troy Towns, Thyestes, that sort of stuff. He's not the flashiest horse. I suspect if I was to talk to Gordon Elliott and I mentioned him, he'd probably look at me with a slightly quizzical face of why am I talking about this horse rather than Firefox. But that being said, trying to point people in the way of something that might improve, especially over a fence, given he's owned by Gigginstown, given where he's come from, I think he'd be a nice horse over a fence this year.
Completely agree. I think he will be nice, and he's a big, big, big boy, so I think he's only going to benefit, hopefully, from a fence if he can get over them well. My third horse to follow is a horse trained by not Paul Nicholls, but one of Paul Nicholls' what do you call it?
Progeny, almost.
Yes, in Harry Durham, who's had a wonderful start to his training career. And this is a horse who I think could be possibly his best novice hurdler next year, and that's Noah's Great Rainbow. We've seen him twice. He won a Wincanton bumper pretty well. The second, who was called Yalla Habibi, has close form with Centre of Attention, which I've also put up as a horse to follow, and has won twice since, I think, rated 121 for Harriet Dickin, and has won decent races, will presumably keep improving as well. And Noah's Great Rainbow was second in the listed bumper at Newbury, which I like, in the back end, the start of February, back end of January. He's a proper Paul Nicholls type of horse.
Yeah.
He's a lot of Harry's, I think, because he's just started training, he hasn't been able to buy the model of horse that he has been used to
dealing with,
co-training at Ditchit. Whether this lad, I got the impression, is quite expensive and really looks like a Paul Nicholls horse.
Nice looking
horse.
Yeah.
They kind of sent him out in the first bumper, and he looked like almost Harry Cobden riding, and it was a Paul Nicholls trained horse, and I think he could be really quite nice. That listed bumper, I think, is always a good form line to go with every single year. And there's a few horses that I might get onto later that are also coming from that race. So Noah's Great Rainbow, hopefully, is going to be pretty smart and could develop into a graded horse. I don't think he's going to be a grade 1 winner. I don't think he's been winning Cheltenham Festival races, but I do think he could feature in those graded, maybe 2 mile races, the likes of the Supreme Trial, something like that at Cheltenham, maybe even the race at the old Tolworth.
Yes.
I can't remember
the Formby or something.
Yeah, something like that at Aintree. I think he could be a decent horse.
Yeah, no, I can see that. My one horse from Britain on this episode comes from Donald McCain's yard, and it's a horse called Grand Albert for the owners group. Obviously, people will know I have a huge affiliation with Maximilian from the owners group. For Donald, I would like to hope we might see him at some stage this season, but I wouldn't be maybe overly confident on that. This horse, I think, had some really nice bits of form last year, campaigned in smaller types of races, but ran well behind leader in the park at Doncaster, won at Bangor, and then got slightly outstayed over 2 miles 7 furlongs by a Rebecca Curtis horse, Haiti Callure, who's actually running in the novice chase at Chepstow this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how he shapes up over fences. I was just really taken by him last year in the way that he jumped very nicely. He travels pretty strongly. I think he's probably a 2.5 miler. He's got a mark of 121 over hurdles, which, given what he's actually achieved, I think is quite lenient. When you look at those novice handicaps, especially up, north in northern England, in Scotland, there's an awful lot of winnable races up there. I think he's the type of horse, as we've seen with Donald before, where you could actually latch up a little bit of a sequence. I'm not saying Donald's got maybe the greatest amount of ammunition this year to go to war with, but he's got a few nice novice chases. He's got Beneficially Yours. He's got a horse like this that really actually might be more of a 140 horse in the future, 135 horse, and he's going to be starting off potentially in novice handicaps off 121. I think that's workable. I think all of his form is quite nice. I'd be interested in seeing leader in the park for Ben Pauling as well. I know a couple of the right faces quite like him going over a fence this year. I think he's a similar enough rating. So that piece of form from Doncaster I'm going to hold close to the heart.
I like it. I think Ben Pauling, going back to him, I think he's going to have a very, very good season. Yes. He's got a lot of decent horses. And do you know, when we often have the conversation of which trainer is going to break into that top 3 of Skelton, Nicky and Pool in this country anyway, I think it would be Pooling if I was going to put it anywhere.
Interesting as well, it was announced today, your one Camilla Sharples, who was the travelling head at Gordon's for, I'd say, 10 years, excellent, has taken up the travelling head last role at Ben Pauling. So he's bringing in the staff behind him. He's got the horses, lots of really good owners. It's a lot of positives.
It is a lot of positives. My next horse to follow is a handicap hurdler, hopefully, anyway, and it's a horse trained by Dan Skelton, and he's called Valr. I would go as far to say I think this horse could be the best handicapped horse staying hurdling in the country.
Okay, Jesus. I can see that, yeah.
Let me tell you why.
I'm about to say my horse was the next one I'm putting up is the best handicapped horse in Ireland. So
that's
we've got two for here.
That is absolutely perfect. I'm going with Valr because he was second in the Cheltenham October bumper behind the Kemble Brewery. I thought that was a decent race. We then didn't see him, and he finished fourth in the Aintree Grade 2 bumper, where he was actually a short price, which I like as well. There clearly was lots of stable confidence behind him. Finished fourth, ran really, really well. He then went to Uttoxeter and Bangor and won 2 extremely ordinary novice hurdles at the back end of last year. Yeah. And didn't look really flashy doing it, but he jumped really well and he kind of toughed it out. But he got given a mark of 118, and I thought 118 for a horse who's done that in his bumper campaign and is got a perfect record over hurdles, I thought was very lenient. I would say he'd be more of a 130 plus horse. I think he will get up to that. And I think the Skeltons originally were going to really run him at the start of the season quite a lot, because I think he likes the slightly better ground. I think he wants to like winter heavy ground. He was meant to be going for the Persian War, wasn't entered. I spoke to Dan today and said, is he okay? Is he fine? He said, yeah, absolutely fine, but we're going to go to the Cheltenham October meeting, where on the Friday, I think there's 4 options. I didn't actually ask him which race, but you've got the 2.5 mile handicap hurdle, you've got the Supreme Trial, the Grade 2 Supreme Trial.
Forget that's at the October meeting.
And obviously the Persian War was 2.5 miles race, so that's an option as well. You've got the 2.5 mile novice hurdle there, which is just like a class 2.
It
was not a great
Bruno
race.
won that last year.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And then there's a 2 mile conditional jockeys handicap hurdle as well to finish the card on the Friday. So there's 4 options on the one day, nothing on the Saturday. But I do think that he's going to probably take a good bit of beating if he goes for any of those. The Grade 2 is obviously going to be competitive, but then I think if they're running in a Grade 2, then they clearly think a lot of the horse as well. Yeah. So you can take slight different positives. If it's a handicap of 118, I will definitely be backing him. He's a horse who I think can develop into... I think in a couple of years' time, looking at him as a novice chaser going, he could possibly be featuring in graded novice chasers. I think he's that decent.
Definitely.
Quick horse, jumps very nimbly, a lot to like, and 118 I thought was a gift. So Valr hopefully can run up a couple of strings, and we just need to tell Dan that go the handicap route. Don't forget about the graded races until we need to get there.
It's slight look away feeling to that, the way he's flirting with Grade 2 races, and you're like, no, there's just no need.
No, let's win our handicaps first.
Let's just win it. If he was to win a handicap over 2 miles, for instance, would you see him rocking up in a Great Wood? Or do you think he needs a trip?
No, I thought it was interesting that he was entered in he was a supposed runner, and they were targeting the Persian War over 2.5, because to me he looked really speedy.
Yeah, well, I thought that too.
I didn't see him as a stayer, especially. The Persian War usually is running against. Like, imagine if he was running against the McFabulous year. They're proper Time Hill. They're proper stayers. Yeah. He wasn't that type of horse at all. But then I remember they ran Quid Pro Quo in the race a couple of years ago, and he was a speed horse and summer horse. But I think Valr's a good bit better than him. So I'm excited about him, and I do think 118 will look extremely lenient come this time next year.
Well, from the best handicapped horse in the UK
to the best handicapped horse in Ireland.
Yeah, I believe so.
Go on.
Well, you're looking at the juveniles from last year.
Okay.
Juvenile form, I think, was decent. We've already seen from the likes of a Galway hurdle, the juvenile form has really stood up well. Nürburgring won the race very easily, and Dowie was in the frame. All the right faces in there. You got the likes of Cargies, ran brilliantly in the Triumph Hurdle, Grade 1 winner. Madgeborough was obviously excellent. The absolute outlier here, and just because we haven't seen her since the Dublin Racing Festival, is Kalakan, who's off 130 for Gordon Elliott and Rob Corr. I just think this filly's well ahead of 130. Now, obviously, some of that is a little bit hindsight looking back, but she was second, just beaten by a length by Nürburgring at Fairyhouse in the December at the Hatton's Grace meeting, that Grade 3 juvenile hurdle that kicks off Hatton's Grace State. Plenty of good horses have ran in that in the past. Then went to Christmas, turned the tables on Nürburgring and won the Grade 2 there, and then was fifth, beaten cigarette papers really in the Grade 1 at the Dublin Racing Festival. I think must have come with a slight setback after that, because you'd like to have thought she'd have ran in whether it would be a Triumph Hurdle or a Boodles.
Triumph, I'd say.
Yeah, you might as well, because she was a Grade 2 winner. But I just believe of 130. I kind of couldn't believe it. And I just think if I don't know how she'll be campaigned. I don't know whether Gordon will take a light approach, and will we see her in the Mayor's Handicap Hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival, which he's won so many times before. Whether we'll see her maybe in that big handicap hurdle at Fairyhouse on Hatton's Grace weekend this time round. I don't know, but she's a strong staying 2-miler. She's tough. I don't think the hurly-burly of handicap is going to be any phase to her. I just really like the way she goes about her business. And off 130, I think you're dealing with a genuine graded horse. Obviously has brought graded form from the table at Juvenile Company. I'm not saying she's going to compete in graded open hurdles this year.
Could she develop into a Coral Cup horse? That kind of...
She's not far away from like your Black Tears type of horse.
Okay.
I don't think, in fact,
she
might actually be better than that.
Is there a way she runs in the Mayor's Hurdle then? You think she could develop into that kind of horse?
Well, see, the thing is, if you run her in a Mayor's Handicap Hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival and she bolts in, you're going to probably struggle to keep her in, line to run in a Coral Cup, or she'd probably want to step up in trip at some stage. But I don't think she's far away from being a Mayor's Hurdle horse. If the kind of progression keeps going, I don't see any reason why she was just a flash in the pan juvenile. So if you look at all that form, that's already beginning to materialise over hurdles, I think 130, she's the complete outlier of the bunch.
I really like that, and I'd imagine Gordon's very excited about her as well. Right, my final horse to follow before we get on to Chepstow Fancies is a Ben Pauling novice hurdler this year. A horse called Royce.
RollsRoyce.
Is it RollsRoyce? Hopefully, yeah. RollsRoyce. Oh, that's a great name. I'm going to call him RollsRoyce from now on. Ran twice. First time he ran in a bumper, he was a bit green. It didn't really happen for him. He still ran very well. I think he finished fourth. But then he went to Newbury, and this form is unbelievably good. He went to Newbury in a second start. He travelled like an absolute dream. So he finished fourth behind Horace's Pearl, by the way, in a Wincanton bumper. Yeah. So it was he was last off the bridle in that race. He just couldn't really put his head down when he was asked. He went to Newbury and travelled. I've never seen a horse in a bumper travel so well. Literally on the bridle the whole way. And then when he was asked to extend, he didn't, which is the slight caveat with him. I think he could be a bit of a bridle merchant, but he's got so much talent, and hopefully he's a bit more switched on upstairs. But let me tell you about the form. David Pipe, I think his most exciting young horse in his yard, finished second to him that year, and as a John Duran Con. Let's just say that. He spelt Duran and then Duran Con. Finished second. He'd won a bumper before, and he won a bumper after.
Yep.
Under a penalty. I think he's the most exciting horse at David Pipe's yard. Catboy for Paul Nicholls was third. He'd won a bumper on his previous start. He was also a 160 grand store horse. I think a lot of him. I think he's running on a Chepstow on Friday. Yeah. They think a lot of him. The fourth was Dr. Kildare, who was a €170,000 store. Nicky Henderson trained and won a 12 on a bumper on his following start. The fifth and sixth have both placed in bumpers since. The ninth won a bumper on the next start. And I just think that race was really, really solid. And he looked a really good horse going through it. I spoke to Ben today as well and asked him about him, and he said he's monstrous. Yeah, he looks really, really well at home. He's going to start on the second week of November.
Lovely.
They really like him. I think he probably will go to a Newbury novice hurdle, maybe one of those races that Nicky Henderson really likes using. But a real classy kind of Henderson type almost,
Yeah.
where just travelled like a dream. I think if he was a JP horse or a Donnelly horse and he was trained by Nicky Henderson, he'd be spoken about in those Supremes and stuff like that.
Gallers, yeah.
Did it so easily, and because he's got a 4 on his record, I think people maybe slightly underestimate him. But he also finished 4th, beaten 7 lengths by the Aintree bumper winner, so it's good form. I think he's really, really smart, and out of all the ones I've spoken about today, if we're talking about, obviously Tutti Man's going to stay in bumpers, but about the novice hurdlers, Noah's Great Rainbow I think is going to be good, Tutti Quanti I think is going to be good. I think this Royce could be really good.
Yeah.
He's the one who would excite me, and I do think Ben's got, I mean, he obviously had
got a lot of good horses.
Yeah, Diva Luna looks really exciting for the mares division, but he's also got 3 or 4 of these really smart bumper horses that are going to be featuring in these good races, and if he's up there with possibly the best of them, then he's clearly a very good one.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. And I can also, as you said, I can echo. I know he had a very good season last year, but I think it's just only going to get better and better.
Yeah, and the Jukebox Man is the obvious one. I wouldn't be as excited about him. I think he's got loads of really other exciting horses.
I would just be a little bit concerned with the Jukebox Man. He had 2 absolute pearlers, at the end of last season. An Albert Bartlett, which took a lot out of him, an Aintree race that took a lot out of him. That may leave its mark, but at the same time, he's a genuine Grade 1 horse, and I think the more and more Ben has of those types of horses, the more and more confidence he's going to have campaigning the likes of Royce.
Well, he's got a couple of, that Mumbo number 5 is expensive. He's got a couple of point-to-point winners that were 350 plus as well. So he's got, there's lots of investment. There's probably not as many of them going into, say, a Paul Nicholls or a Nicky Henderson, but the quality is on par, and that's only recent in the last few years. So I do think that we are going to see Ben a massive player in maybe not the Trainers' Championship, but definitely competing at the top level throughout the season. Right, now it's time for Chepstow.
Best bets.
Chepstow chat, or anything really, best bets. Do you want to go first?
I will, yeah. Look, we're trying to hold ourselves accountable. I think we're going to track our bets this year. Yeah. Hopefully that won't end up being a car crash. Fingers crossed. I've got 2 for the weekend. I think overall Chepstow's quite a trappy start to the... I know everyone gets so excited, but then you look at the cards and go, oh, they're very hard. 1 for Friday, who's definitely obviously going to run because we've got the decks. 1 for Saturday in the 4-year-old handicap hurdle. The 1 on Fridays in the 4:25, the 3-mile novices handicap chase. I feel these days Kim Bailey's a little bit of a streak trainer at times. He can have real nice kind of hot patches. He can have times where the yard are maybe not quite at firing. He's had some really nice winners the last couple of days. I think the horses are in rude health. And he's got a horse called Destroy the Evidence, which...
That's the red and yellow silks, isn't it? Yeah.
Indeed. When you look at some of my nights out over the years, we could have probably done with destroying the evidence.
He's going up against Isaac de Zobo.
He is, and there'll be an awful lot of talk about Isaac de Zobo. I wonder whether he'd want a little bit more cut in the ground. He's an enormous horse. First time out over fences. Destroy the Evidence, probably a little bit more of a handy horse.
And I'm right in thinking that he won that race last year with Chianti Classico.
He did. So they clearly tried to target it. He's off 130. His form kind of tapered away at the back end of last year, but as did quite a lot of Kim Bailey's horses. So therefore I'd be willing to allow that be. He ran in some really good races, some graded novice hurdles. He stays forever. I think if he's within a chance kind of turning in, up the long straight at Chepstow, get him rolling, I think he's got a big chance. Obviously that race hasn't been priced up, and neither actually has the 4-year-old handicap hurdle on the Saturday, which is the 2:10 I believe. I'm going to give a chance to Masai Mara for John O'Shea. I'd like to hope he's going to be a double figure price. Obviously he has a quirk or two. He's been a little bit of a bridle horse on the flat this year, had some nice hurdle form last year when going juvenile hurdling, then got left at the start at Sandown in a real Mickey Mouse start at the back end of the season when he was well fancied. As I say, I'd like to hope he's going to be 10 or 12 to 1, and he's the type of horse that with the way the race usually gets run, they go hard in front. He's a strong traveller. He's got a bit of flat speed. I'd like to hope he'll be within the mix. He's off 119.
Hopefully it can be a good start. I've actually got one that's going to oppose him in that race. But I've got two for Friday before we speak about that. The first one comes in the 210. The novice hurdles have been split, so there's two now. Catboy runs in one. I'm going to take him on. I think he will drive a lot of the attention. I'm going to take him on with Clap of Thunder of Nigel Twiston-Davies, who I know will be hard fit, which I like. He was very smart last year, finished 5th in the listed bumper at Newbury, that listed bumper that we talked about earlier with regards to Noah's Great Rainbow. I always really, really liked that race. He then went to Fairyhouse at the back end of last year, and they couldn't believe he got beat so convincingly, but that was by Kopek de Board, who's the horse who I've said is my most exciting novice this year. I think he's going to make that form look really good and win well. I think he's exciting. He reminds me of a classic Nigel Twiston-Davies, like a battle-hardened.
Yeah, gritty horse.
Yeah, gritty horse. But I think he's got a bit of class, and I do think they think an awful lot of him as well. And because he hasn't got a string of ones next to his name, I think he could be a decent price. I don't think he'll go a favourite, but I think he'll be, he could be
4 to 1.
2 to 1 to 5 to 1. I think I back him anywhere between that. I think he's going to go and win the 210 on Friday. One in the Persian War as well. I looked at it and
it's not vintage, is it?
No, the favourite Ryan's Rocket for Fergal, I thought, hasn't run over 2.5.
Yeah.
Has won a 3 mile point to point, so maybe not as worried. But under rules, I don't like that angle. That race is funny. It's usually won by a handicapper who's hard fit or a really classy Paul Nicholls horse.
Yeah.
And there isn't a classy Paul Nicholls horse. I think he was going to run Tishan. He's not running. Flying Fortune for the Bowens is like that progressive, hard fit handicapper, but I'm not sure he's going to be quite good enough. I'm looking through it all, and the one I ended up picking, the McConnell horse, was interesting. I think he might be a bit too slow for this. Juventus de Brion, who is actually a maiden over hurdles, finished 3rd on 2 starts, once in a bumper and once in a novice hurdle last year. It was kind of at the start of this year, so I think it was February maybe. He finished 3rd behind Pickrock and in the Waterside at Ascot. In the Waterside went on to frank that form very much at Aintree, and what I really like, he's ran on soft ground over 2.5 miles, so he's going to get that. He really stayed onto the line. He was off the bridle quite a lot, but I think that's just mental immaturity. They clearly like him enough to start him here. Dan Skelton isn't also going to be messing around. He wants to win the Trainer Championship. He's at a flying start. He's not going to be running a horse like this just to have a run. He will be ready. It's good prize money, and I think he's 6 to 1. In a 7 or 8 runner race, I'm going to back him each way. It's obviously not the most flashy bet in the world, but I do think that he could be a really smart horse. And what I really like is he's running against Pickrock, who I think is exciting, and in the Waterside in a good race at Ascot. He's gone to one of those big days. He's gone to a big track, and a lot of these horses haven't. They've got kind of rubbishy form at not wonderful tracks. And he doesn't have that. So I think that although he hasn't won, I think he's a decent price, and I'm going to back him at 6 to 1. Then the last one to oppose you on Saturday in the 4-year-old handicap hurdle is Liari for Paul Nicholls. Paul Nicholls always does really, really well at this meeting, and I do think that he was very, very impressive before whatever happened at Cheltenham, but I don't think that was his true running, and I think that he can continue his upward trajectory. I think he could be quite a smart horse. So Liari under Cobden in the 4-year-old handicap hurdle. But they're my 3: Clap of Thunder, Juventus de Brion, and Liari.
Destroy the Evidence and Masai Mara.
There we go. Hopefully, if you're going to Chepstow, come and say hello, and I hope you have a profitable one. Do get involved in the giveaway. You can go into the Cheltenham parade ring for a race at the October meeting, experience what all those trainers get to experience so often. They don't know how lucky they are. And yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that as well. You'll be with us. So if you want to do that, again, comment, let's talk Cheltenham, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're nearly at 20,000 subscribers, so all your support massively, massively helps us reach the bigger audience, and that's what we do it for. We want to get as many people interested in racing, especially people of a younger generation. So great that Cheltenham's come on board with the channel, and we do hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for all the support on the recent videos. We've got a few exciting videos hopefully coming this week, bit of a different one as well. I think we sat down the other night and just had a general hours-long chat. And that might be coming up in a couple of days' time. So we do hope you enjoy that, and we'll see you soon.